Hey everyone, welcome to the Incubator Podcast. I'm your co-host, Darren Boyd.
And this is Satbir Sran. Today we're excited to bring you Nick Rago, who is the VP of Product Strategy at Salt Security, an API security leading firm. Welcome, Nick.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
All right, Nick, thanks again for joining us. I'm really excited today to walk through the history of Salt Security and where the market has been or is going, I should say, in API security and that ecosystem, if you will. But before we get started, it would be great for our listeners to hear a little bit more about your background, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. No issues there. I've been, neck deep in technology pretty much. I'd say all of my life, dating back to, I think I had my hands first on. I don't know if you guys remember the old Tandy TRS-80. You guys remember that? The old radio show?
I had one of those with little cassette tapes and everything, and TRS-80.
So, and I graduated off that to the predecessor of the IBM PS2, which was the PCXT. Yeah, so DOS. So as a hobby, as a kid, taking those machines apart, putting them back together. I remember even growing up through, almost through high school, coding, programming. And then I going to my parents saying, hey, you know what? I don't know what I want to be. And they're like looking at my bedroom saying, really? That's look at the signs. So have a computer science background, developer by trade. Found out really quickly that coming from a pretty rambunctious, loud Italian family, that I love chaos, and not just personally but professionally. So in my fifth startup right now. So I've gone through, worked for 5 different startup companies across the board, from application testing to mobile device management to data security, API management, and now API security. So
I want to do a public service announcement for all parents. So I also had a TRS-80, but my father would not let me touch that thing. He guarded it with his life. And so look at what can happen. Look at our 2 different paths. We both started from the same spot. Anyway.
Well, I was going to say, with 5 startups under your belt, and maybe you've learned to structure the chaos now as a product leader in the organization, and certainly have been maturing Salt Security, as one of those firms that's been years in the industry, right? One of the stalwarts, if you will, and where the industry now is evolving to. So it's great to see that.
Yeah. Why don't we, Nick? Why don't we jump into a little bit of Salt? Salt is it's a pioneering company, but it's only been around for a few years, like 2018. I mean, I guess in tech terms, that's a really good run already. But you were first to a lot of things. I think you were the first to have an API dedicated global research organization. You now have kind of an AI infused capability in your API security. I've seen not only demos, but I've had a little bit of hands-on as well. What you can discover and how quickly you can discover it, and what you can surface as part of that discovery is a really, really fascinating attribute of your platform. But if you could start all the way back and say, why Salt started. I think it's going to be obvious to all, but why Salt started, what problem did they see, and how are you staying so innovative and keeping up with the trends, because a lot is going on in the API space in general. So if you could just give us a little bit of a glimpse into Salt, we can then start kind of decomposing some of the areas.
Yeah, and a lot's going on, not even in the API space, but even in the tooling space, right? All of the different security silos and what they do and who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit of a moving target. So I would say, yeah, we were the pioneers in the space, the godfathers of the space. I think we were the first to the soapbox that stood on it and said, hey, a big wave is coming, and you're not ready for it from a security standpoint. I mean, just from my perspective, when I came from, and you folks know I came from Kong previously. I was one of the early employees over at Kong. So in a lot of the digital transformation projects that we worked on there, and even prior to that, I worked for a company. We were doing the mobile device management, managed the engineering and product of their BYOD portal product, which is all API driven. it became pretty clear to me the mess that we were creating with all these digital transformations. The world is becoming fragmented, right? So we were seeing that monolith application of the yesteryear breakup into all of these services and microservices, and everybody adopting that, and really with zero governance, with zero thought of security, and it was, and that honestly, that was really what prompted me to kind of look at. I'm like, there's got to be technologies and companies that are looking into this space, and that's what prompted me actually to make the move over to Salt to really try to solve that piece of the problem. The interesting thing was for our founders here, Michael and Roy, they were on that soapbox saying, listen, this is going to be a problem and you need to get in front of it. This is going to be a wave. And it's been interesting to see over the last few years how it's been it's moved from sort of evangelizing to thought of as really niche security to really mainstream security. This is now one of the prevalent attack vectors that adversaries are using in the wild. And we have all the statistics in the world this year to back that up. And Darren, like you said, there was a few major problems with that. It was, I don't even know what this attack surface is because I'm not watching it. I don't have any governance around it. And the scary thing is, Roy in particular, our founder, was able to quickly see, from his vantage point, that these attacks are different, and the telemetry systems and the edge defense systems that a lot of large enterprise companies were using can't see these attacks. The attacks that were taking place and in sort of the malicious reconnaissance that was taking place, we're really looking for things called like business logic flaws or business logic vulnerabilities. And for all intents and purposes, those type of attacks look like normal behavior, normal transactions. So if you're looking at kind of, for DDoS patterns or injection signatures and those type of things, these are attack types that we're getting through. And if you kind of look back over the last few years at some of the breaches, you'll see some of the big ones. The attack campaigns lasted, in one case, a big social media outfit, over 18 months. They had no idea that information was being sifted, or unexpiring access tokens were being minted and sifted out of their systems for over a year. So that gives you some sort of sense of the problem that we really were evangelizing, and really were first to market with the technology to say, okay, first you have to shore up your defenses, shore up your edge, so that you have some visibility to when this has happened so that you can stop it. And then in the last year or two, we've really moved over, I'd say, kind of shifting more to the left, where we're focusing on the governance aspect of it. The problem, there's this visibility and posture governance issue that's taking place as well. So yeah, that's kind of where the product came from, and the platform the company came from, and sort of the shift that we've been seeing over the last couple of years.
So Nick, just building on that a little bit, right? I think Gartner in 2024 said, "Hey, API security is going to be, or API kind of breaches will be a top priority, or so, as one of the top 10 that or top 20, I forget, that Gartner highlights." Now, do you see that in the industry as a whole that that enterprises have begun to really adopt API security in a more serious manner? Certainly, you all were pioneering this, and it's true and accurate. But are people grasping the gravity that, yes, are they connecting the dots to say this is a real problem? So how do we establish the governance around it, and how do we actually now manage and deploy API security as part of our kind of development patterns?
It's a great question. I think, like, we've seen these sort of waves of new threats as they come down the pike. Think of the one right before this was all around cloud governance, right? We're moving all our workloads to the cloud, and everybody looks for the easy button to help for defense. API security, we started to see, like I said, it was niche. We started to see breaches, very public breaches that started to find their way into the press. And then what happened is the enterprise was looking for the easy button. I'm going to go to my WAF provider. They're saying they do API security. Well, I have this testing technology, this framework. They say they do API security. Everybody all of a sudden has API security, that checkbox showing up. The interesting thing that happened over the last 18 months or so is that we're seeing those investments, organizations figuring out that, wait a second, there's no easy button here. We have a framework, we have a governance issue. This is a bigger problem. One of the interesting things that's happened over the last year with a lot of organizations that I work with is for the first time they're looking at their APIs as IT assets. It's their way of solving the problem is, listen, just like we did with cloud governance and everything that we have from a cloud asset standpoint, how we secure them, how we tag them, how we look at them, we have to do the same things with APIs. And they're finding their ways in CMDBs now, which is very, very interesting. We're seeing a lot of organizations, but that mindset of it's an IT asset. I have to know about it. I have to know how it's used, the data associated with it, who owns it, how often it's changed. All of that needs to be under my purview. And then if I have that information, I have the ingredients to go ahead and begin to secure it or understand how to build a governance program around it to secure it. So that's been the big mind shift that we've seen taking place over the year, and it's really driven a lot of especially what I do on the product strategy side in terms of what we're building and how we're building and when we're building.
I'm going to try to make a linkage here, and forgive me or forgive my ignorance on it perhaps. Is Nick, you talked about governance and the CMDB aspect of basically what am I dealing with? What do I have in my API landscape? Is this where it's important to look at governance alongside your API gateways and your API management kind of ecosystem? And not speaking necessarily to your history, but there is a lot of, I guess, complementary thought process there between Kong as a gateway, perhaps, or any other gateway that exists out there, along with Salt. And if so, how is Salt bringing that ecosystem into the governance way of thinking that you all are putting forth?
That's a great question, and that's one of the big problems. Is there is no, like I said, there is no easy button. There's no one technology that solves it. And there is an ecosystem of technologies, but they all have to be playing by the same set of rules, right? That same standard of what good is. And the interesting thing with the ecosystem previously was, or still is today in most organizations, is that if you go in and ask the different personas, the architect, the developer, the person in application security who's constructing the testing, the folks in security operations, what a good API is, you get 5 different answers. You get a different answer from every one of them. So if that's the case, how do I know what good is, and how do I, how do I gauge what good is? And that's been a big issue for organizations. So the thing that we've been helping organizations with is first building that standard, because if I build that standard, I can assess what's my current state look like, against that standard today? How compliant am I? And if I'm now watching and enforcing this standard, that gives me something I can push left to everybody else, so that even before I start to build and I'm designing an API, I should know if it's going to be out of compliance, right? If I'm leveraging AI and these new code assistants, which is, I know we'll probably talk about today, and a lot of developers are leveraging AI-based technologies to help code. That code assistant should know what a good API is. What's the corporate standard that it should be following, right? If there's a golden rule that says, hey, if you use anything with a user ID, it has to be in UUID format, everybody across the line should know that. So that was the first big piece, is build the standard, build that policy engine, because there's nothing like it in the industry that existed prior to us. And then from there, share it with the whole ecosystem so that everybody, again, is playing against the same standard and the same set of rules.
I like, I want to go all the way back to some other statements you made, because it's hard not to talk about some of the differentiation of Salt when we go down this path, because there's, like when you were saying folks are now treating APIs as assets, that was beautiful to hear. We often are coming in to clients that are early in their journey, and we're trying to help them get there. So we're seeing something similar. We're seeing people put it in an IDP. We're seeing people put it in CMDBs. So I'm glad from your vantage point that you're seeing that at a broader scale. But we also see a lot of folks that say the exact same thing you did, which is, hey, a lot of folks can solve this for me. I can do it in my WAF. I can do it in some tooling. This is where I really want to talk about what Salt does that I think is very unique and is absolutely necessary, which is you said it earlier, you can look at business logic. You can look at across hundreds of attributes to determine that logic is being manipulated. And you're looking at consistency of pattern or parameter inputs. You're looking at volumes of responses over time. You're looking at some nuances that allow you to make some really interesting claims And then you can do something that I see very few IT organizations able to do successfully, which is you can get into blocking states with confidence. A lot of folks say in other industries, they go, oh, we can do some blocking. We aren't going to turn that on at all. It breaks way too many things. But Salt has got so many unique pattern capabilities that there is a confidence with your patented ability to go into blocking. Can you talk about some of that differentiation, why it's so important in this API economy, why it's so important that you have something that is very unique, others are not able to follow suit, you've got all sorts of intelligence in this space. What are you bringing to market that makes that so unique?
I think first and foremost, it's the whole risk reduction strategy. I think, and then I'll answer the question about the runtime piece in particular, Darren. The strategy is our differentiator. This risk reduction strategy, like I mentioned before, there's no easy button. So when we're straight up with our customers, we'll walk in and we'll basically say, listen, if you want to reduce risk, this is the journey you need to go on. This is how we've built our platform. This is the journey that we'll take you on. Here's the partners that'll help you do it. Are you willing to do that? And some companies are looking for the easy button and they want to try that first for a year. And those are the boomerangs that come back to us a year later and say, you know what, this didn't work for us. We have to work this out. So I'll answer the question this way. It's twofold. First is the governance side of it. There's the posture governance piece of it, because I think on the behavioral threat protection, the piece you were mentioning, if I don't have a good handle on posture governance, what I have, how it's used, and all of those, all of that API intelligence, behavioral threat protection is much, much more difficult. So you have to kind of do that first step. Build your governance program, understand what good is, and be able to assess for it. And I'm kind of harping on that because if I look at the breach statistics over the last couple of years, about 70%, this is our research, about 70% of the API breaches that occurred were misconfiguration based. So what did that basically mean? It meant that the adversary had a very low barrier to breach. So the technical aptitude of that hacker, you can't even really call them a hacker, right? Because what they did to take advantage of the broken business logic or misconfiguration in the gateway, those type of things. So we're always like, listen, get your arms around the problem first. And one of the neat things that we do, especially when we walk in organizations, is we'll say, here's your Death Star. I don't know if you guys remember Amazon, and we used this at Kong years ago when we were selling the gateway originally there. Amazon had put out their AWS Death Star years ago and basically showed you what all their microservice architecture looked like. And it was gigantic. And we'd be like, this is going to be your world in 5 years. And sure enough, if you kind of map out these APIs today during discovery, everybody has that Death Star. And so that's, okay, great. I got to understand what this is. And then the next thing is, well, okay, it is in production. I'm building a governance program. Like you mentioned, Darren, is how do you protect it? The secret sauce for us at the beginning of this, because we came out on that right side first, really helping, complement the edge defense technologies. The secret sauce there is all about not behavioral analysis. It is behavioral analysis, but it's intent analysis. And that's a big, big difference. And that is when we talk about the patented technology and, all the buzzwords of ML and AI and everything else that's under the hood there, it all comes down to what is the intent of the API consumer. By, computer science and, math degree, big numbers guy. If you look at the numbers, 0.02% of behavioral anomalies are malicious in nature, 0.02%. So what does that mean? It means if I'm looking for behavioral anomalies and I send those to the SOC, you're squashing the SOC. You're gonna shelf that in a week. And that's what happened originally. If you look at even Gartner and some of when they talk about behavioral threat protection or API protection, they say, hey, be prepared. You're going to need bodies. You're going to need to outsource first line. We wanted to make sure that didn't happen. And so we've been training for years this intent analysis engine that basically says, let me look collectively at these behavioral anomalies down to the degree that you mentioned, Darren, earlier, whereas, very, very minute things. And that's why we figured out early on, this is not something we could do on-prem. We need cloud compute and cloud learning capability to be able to surface a lot of these anomalies that no other technology can see. But then when we surface them, don't drown you with it. We have to be able to actually understand what's the intent behind. Is this someone who is a developer that's making an integration error while they're doing testing? That's an anomaly. The SOC shouldn't know about it. Or is this someone who has actually programmed a bot to do malicious reconnaissance against an application that I have exposed on the internet? that's the secret sauce, and that is the real differentiator, because that's the difference between operationalizing a technology like this or shelving a technology like this. And that for us has been that's been the big differentiator. And quite honestly, it's one of the toughest things to do if, us as the provider of that technology, because a lot of organizations, when they test it, they don't test in production. They test in a lab. So you don't really get to feel what this would look like in production unless you have the production load. And then, there's other options, there's cheaper options, there's different technologies. I'll try to run it on-prem, and then the SOC gets killed, and then we get called back and say, you know what, we got to, yeah, maybe your way is the better way to do this.
So this is, I mean, okay, I love everything you're talking about right now. So there's a crude example I use when it comes back to intention, which is I may intend when I give you a hammer to have you build a house, but you could bludgeon your neighbor. Your intention matters. I didn't intend for that to happen. You had an intention that you brought to the space as well. I can't underscore enough, like my call to, I guess, to our customers and anybody listening is that is such a big part of this is what you have done from not flooding a SOC, but giving high fidelity signals is it can't be understated. Everything we're doing these days, I don't have a single customer that hasn't kind of exposed their APIs as a means of delivering value internally or externally, and so just that alone could devastate a SOC. But there's something else that I think is really, really powerful about Salt, which is, and I'm going to paint you with a bit of a basic brush. Let me know if it applies. One, you're incredibly easy to set up. All right, like not only from deployment, but also from like you have a rich ecosystem of partners as well. There's many ways to invoke Salt. Your architecture is set up for easy consumption, very easy to deploy, and then you surface things very, very deep insights very quickly. Like I've seen kind of an explosion of results from here's your top attack vectors, here's your concentration of usage, here's your most vulnerable endpoints, and then the policy engine you have is, I mean, it doesn't get any simpler than how you've created your policy engine, and even like policies that you have built are very easy to consume and understand because it's all right there. The logic is very easy to adopt. And then, of course, what we just talked about, the powers in the back end, being able to discern attacks based on intention is something that I don't think anybody is coming close to. Do I have that right? Easy to use, quick results, very, very powerful and adaptive policy engines, and then your AI and ML in the background to surface these intentions. It makes it a no-brainer to me. Is there anything else you would add to that list of what makes Salt so simple and powerful?
Yeah, I think you do. You have it right. Because we've done it this way, some of the innovations that we've just recently released, and that we're going to be releasing over the next couple quarters here, without giving too much away, because of this intent analysis engine, like we were the first technology, because we knew SOCs were shrinking, security budgets were shrinking. This is a difficult problem to solve. If you take a look at anything that's behavioral analysis, there's always some type of subjectivity to it, right? It's not like I can just automatically say block. Usually it required some analyst eyes to look at it. Because we did it this way, it allowed us to really graduate a lot of the ML that we're leveraging in the AI, and incorporate now LLMs, another buzzword I'll throw in here, into all of this, so that you have that first level SOC analyst baked into the product now. So it looks at behaviors, it understands, and actually gives you feedback and says, hey, this is someone who's doing malicious reconnaissance, and this is the reason why. And this is the reason why I recommend you block them, or I auto block them, and this is why. So I think, the foundation of the technology and how we did it is lending itself to some pretty cool things that we're doing right now to make this just even much easier. And I will say too, I think we've done a really good job of helping companies get to value pretty quickly, but it's not good enough by any means. Anytime you have a technology that requires traffic and not just access logs, we're talking about full request response payloads. a lot of times it's not a click of a button to do that. There's a lot of, and especially if you're security, right? Because security, if you want to plug into the API gateway, they didn't buy it, they didn't own it. They have to call in favors to do to get access to those systems, into other systems to do this sort of thing. So we are really, really excited. I won't give too much away, but really, really excited about some technology we're going to be launching very shortly that will really help organizations get closer to that easy button, and really, really help companies accelerate the time to value. So a lot of new discovery capabilities. We introduced end of last year, technology called Salt Surface, which was a reconnaissance technology. It was what does my adversary see on the outside? Its whole point is to basically take the brains of our researchers and put that inside of a scanning technology that will do all of those reconnaissance techniques and try to find API endpoints that you don't know about that are externally facing. Like we've worked with hotel chains, and we've exposed, with this tool technology, we've shown them that, listen, did you know in these 5 hotels, your HVAC systems, lighting systems are all exposed to the internet? No idea. Just completely rogue. Didn't realize my developers did that. So, it's technologies, innovations like that, that really help you get to value quickly. So we have a couple neat new technologies that we're going to be introducing, very very shortly here in this first quarter that will really help accelerate that for customers.
Nick, that was a lot, but a lot of good stuff between what you just highlighted, what Darren was kind of recapping here, because this really resonates with enterprise. I think we talked at the beginning of this conversation was, have people really taken API security seriously, right? So some were just watching from the sidelines. Now you also have there's a realization, yeah, we should do something about it, but they're afraid that, well, you could say they're afraid of what they might uncover, but putting that aside, well, how do we deal with this? Again, you talked about the operationalization, bearing the SOC, and time to value. So how do we convey this like in a meaningful way to a security leader that Salt has the secret sauce, and without, I know you alluded to what's coming down the pike, but without really talking about that, to say, look, not only were you the pioneer, but you get it, you got the governance and man, bad day.
The toughest word in the world. Some days it works, some days I do it the same way.
It's not working right now. Without bearing all the day 2 operations, right? How do you best convey that to say, look, it's truly a meaningful investment that you need to make in your security posture and defending yourself, preventing those breaches, and it's not going to bury your ops team?
First, I think for a lot of organizations, especially in large enterprises, they think they have something they think they have something in the quiver already today that's addressing, because they definitely do have something that's checking the box that says it does API security. For us, it's a lot, first and foremost, letting them understand that, that's part of it, but you're doing it in a silo and you're not really kind of holistically solving or addressing risk and the problem. The first piece to do that is giving them that view, that visibility view that basically says, this is your attack surface. And like I said, if you kind of put their mindset, a lot of times if I'm working with the CISO, I'll say, listen, think of this as assets inside your data center. Right? And essentially you have people rolling in cabinets of blades, and they're plugging them into your data center, and they're walking away saying bye, and you're not doing anything. You don't know what they are, the data that's in them, if they're patched, what they actually expose. That's a visual that people understand. That wait a second, okay, yeah, these are endpoints that outsiders can touch. Not only that, the inside threat is also very real as well right now. It doesn't. A lot of adversaries have shown it doesn't take much. One nicely crafted email, someone will click the link to get inside. And once they're inside, if I have something that's, giving the crown jewels away with weak authentication and no authentication, first thing they're doing is they're scanning for API endpoints on the inside for information and control. If I can get to those systems on the inside of the walls, there's a lot of great information there as well. So the attack surface is the external, but also the internal attack surface. The other thing, Satbir, I'll do a lot of times is I use this visual with people, and I'll basically say like, hey, you were defending and you're set up to defend the castle and the moat around the castle, right? That drawbridge. You have all of your defenses behind that drawbridge. You know the assets that you have to defend inside. Everything is stacked there. APIs are different, right? You've converted all these functions to microservices. They're all over the place. You're defending more of a football coliseum now or stadium, right? Every door, every window is potentially a way in and out. And all of the people inside that stadium are assets that you have to defend and also secure them, as well. So that's a visual that people get. But when you show them that in their world, and this is, we ran the scan, here are the assets. Oh, I didn't, that's kind of the first, like, okay, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm not doing everything I should be doing. The second thing is showing them the behavioral attacks that typically are used today. They are used today by an adversary that get by the existing defenses they have, get by the API gateway, it gets by the WAF and the CDN. We call them schema-compliant attacks because what most organizations will do is they'll say, hey, we have a documentation for an API and we'll put it in our WAF or we'll put it in our API gateway. And if something is outside that schema, like a wacky request, we'll block it. The interesting thing about, Darren, like you mentioned before, like a broken business logic, is that those are schema compliant, right? 80% of API breaches are schema compliant. Your WAF, your CDN, your gateway is going to authenticate and let it through. So showing those type of attacks and showing that, hey, you have Ebola here. Those are the things that weigh the most for a lot of our customers and basically get them to the realization that, wow, not only you found this, what you did to get to this data was not very sophisticated. This wasn't a 12, a 12-step, MITRE campaign attack. This was this was a simple request that, an elementary school kid with Postman could have put together and run. And that has been, you have to make people realize that it affects them, right? This isn't somebody else's problem. It's actually their problem as well.
I think the visual of the Coliseum or what Coliseum, is that what you said?
Yeah, football stadium.
The football stadium.
I might have mixed my Italian gladiators with
that one actually gave me chills because as I was thinking about that, I thought, and you know what? Everybody in there is exchanging money. They're buying food. They're buying alcohol. Where are they passing that alcohol? Like there are so much activities going on in there that you are also watching. That like if you like just that visual alone gave me a little bit of chills. That my goodness, you're right. All of these entry points and then everything happening in there. The person that buys the alcohol, did they hand it to a minor? Like there's so many things that could be happening. That could be abuses.
In front of the money, in front of the safe. Are they just handing money out?
Yeah, like just it's pretty alarming, but it's a great way to visualize that. I like that. Yeah. So Nick, anything that I don't know if you can share anything upcoming. How about when can we see some new innovations coming out of SALT? Because the world looks to you, given that you have the research center, given that you are kind of a beacon of what's next. When can we see kind of the next set of innovations coming out of SALT?
So we have a flurry of new releases and new technologies, innovations that are coming out in the first 6 months of the year.
Okay.
You've already started to see some of them. I was just on a webinar with CrowdStrike yesterday.
Great.
We just released a new innovation there. Again, just to help accelerate time to value, like we mentioned before, well, how do I get access to the data to really start, like I mentioned before, okay, talk to the API gateway team, talk to the F5 team. That's not days, that's weeks in large enterprises, right? In order to put a plugin in or, span a port or anything like that to see data. And the interesting thing with this new innovation is that one of the technologies, when we talk about what do you have in your ecosystem, I mean, you guys know CrowdStrike is pretty much everywhere, and there's a CrowdStrike footprint everywhere. And CrowdStrike has done a really good job with extending their footprint beyond user devices to infrastructure devices, especially in the cloud. So where your workloads are running, typically there's some, Falcon exists there. So the integration that we just announced and that we did the webinar, I was on the webinar yesterday and talked about, was showing how customers within essentially 5 minutes, if you have that Falcon footprint, those EDR agents deployed, within a few minutes, you have the ability to actually do discovery on top of them. So we were actually using CrowdStrike Falcon Foundry as the mechanism to do that. But it's basically, we have an application template that pushes down right next to the Falcon agent, and we'll start to capture telemetry on your any API traffic across your whole ecosystem, across your whole cloud within minutes. That's that easy button, right? We're getting closer to it now, being able to do that, and that's a lot of the innovations that we have that we're working towards is really in that type of vein. I will say you can expect other innovations from us really addressing a lot of the new threats that we're seeing. AI. You don't have AI without APIs. And I know you had Reza from Kong on here that he loves using that line. That's true, right? AI is trained by an API. AI gives instruction and command and information by an API to other systems. So it's important to make sure that you're addressing the threats, not just the threat there, but that has been an accelerant for API sprawl, right? A lot of organizations they're encompassing that are these sort of AI-based ventures and services, sprawling APIs everywhere, having this fragmentation issue all over again. That's been a big piece of it. We just started to release data security elements of our platform. So from a data security standpoint, a lot of organizations spending money right now with DSPM solutions, really focusing on what do I have at rest. We're in the nervous system of every major, application that organizations are running. Like if you think about it, APIs are the nervous system to all of those core services, right? To everything that you're building. And what data is flowing through, that nervous system, what is going through the APIs. That's something that we're helping customers answer better now. So we introduced our first interfaces to do that. So you'll be seeing a lot more data governance centric type of interfacing and policies in the product. With respect to those out of the box policies, Darren, that you mentioned before, big focus in sort of really populating that. We spent the last quarter or two building out the policy engine so that organizations can take their standard and actually put them, those written standards into actionable technology. We are now flooding that with policies across all different industries, in verticals and regulatory requirements, just to make it easier for customers to say, okay, this is a great policy engine, but I don't want the empty canvas. What is that other airline doing? What is that other financial services? Like for my vertical, what are people typically adopting as an API standard? What are they doing from a data security standpoint? So can share that. There's a lot of great things that we're introducing into the platform to help with that as well.
That's a lot there, Nick, and amazing stuff. Actually, just by that very answer on the product roadmap has spurred a lot of thought into how we can help our clients really think about the totality of both the attack surface and obviously the resolution with a platform like Salt. So with that, Nick, very glad that we had this conversation. Thank you for coming on to the show. And we wish you and Salt the very best here, and hopefully we can have you on down in the near future as well.
I'd love it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks, Nick.
Take care.
Thank you.